Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 452 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our fifth book just came out. It's called Perseverance and How to Be a Great Fraternity or Sorority Alumnus. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, I had a blast working at the Sigma Pi headquarters from 2012 to 2015, and we had an all-star team of educational leadership consultants and expansion consultants that did such an incredible job in growing the fraternity, serving our chapters in person, and adding 3 to 4 new chapters a semester in some cases. I was extremely fortunate to be working with a ton of extremely talented brothers that continue to serve the fraternity and sorority community today in various capacities. Our next guest is no exception. Having worked for both a fraternity headquarters and professionally on campuses for over a decade, Cory Bosco has worked with communities of all sizes across most of the United States and also Canada. So while working as the director of fraternity and sorority life at Bradley University, Cory has also helped create large-scale learning strategies, having served as the conference chair and on the conference leadership team for the Northeast Greek Leadership Association's annual conference. We call that NGLA. Cory's drive is to help fraternity and sorority members recognize the potential that they have to be transformative leaders, change thinkers, and tone setters for their own campus and beyond. He believes that fraternities and sororities serve an ever more pivotal role in our changing society and the college experience. Cory is dedicated towards providing skills development and practice for our fraternity and sorority members so they may excel as leaders within their own chapters, councils, and communities. So whether you're looking to build up a chapter or strengthen a whole community, Cory has the experience, the passion, and vision to help see your community grow and succeed. Welcome to the show, Cory.
Hey, well, thanks for having me, Mike.
Hey, it is a pleasure catching up with you as always. I know our schedules are just completely bananas, so I'm just grateful that we have the time to sit down and spend about 30 minutes together and reminisce a little bit, which is always fun for me. And, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about where your journey started because you started your college undergrad experience at SIUE, Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. So I'm wondering what made you choose this particular institution?
Well, I'm originally from the St. Louis area. SIUE was in the backyard. It was the school I could go to while staying home, save a little money, living with parents. I was also playing college ice hockey, and my uncle happened to be the coach over there for the club team. So it just worked out.
Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. I didn't know about your uncle with the club ice hockey. I think that's pretty cool. And of course, you joined Sigma Pi fraternity at SIUE, and you could have joined any organization on campus. I'm wondering what made you want to join this particular group?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it all started in orientation. My orientation lead, whenever I came to campus, was a member of the fraternity. Didn't know that because the campus tells you you can't wear your letters during orientation kind of thing. But as I'm walking around campus as classes start, I see him around and he's wearing letters and just got to talking and connected with the group. I'll be honest though, I didn't end up joining until my senior year. I was connected with campus programming, student government, the hockey team, like I said. I just didn't feel I had time for fraternity until that point. But man, when I joined, we dove right into it. We did a lot of work. We did go through a period of sanctioning and issues with the campus that really catapulted me into the leadership position in that chapter, which landed me the job with Sigma Pi HQ. But the work that chapter did, the connections, the brotherhood, the bonding, it was all such an experience.
Yeah. Do you regret not doing it earlier? I mean, than senior year?
Many times I have looked back, I'm like, man, if I had done this a year earlier or 2 years,
Mhm.
but, I came from a campus that we weren't housed. So that live-in fraternity experience that a lot of people reflect on was not one that we had. So, yeah, I regret it, but at the same time, I was still connected to the brotherhood even before I joined, through those friendships I made at orientation. So,
Mhm.
it was really when I made that commitment and jumped in that it all just made sense.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And it also is interesting too from a recruitment standpoint that it really came from an orientation leader. So I think the lesson there is get involved on campus. It's a great way to meet students that are unaffiliated. Orientation is the perfect time because at that point, all of these new freshmen are looking to build relationships on campus. They're trying to figure out, where do I belong on this campus? And who better than an orientation leader to kind of go through, here's all the alternatives, and you just maintain that relationship from orientation all the way through senior year. So I think it's textbook in terms of what fraternities and sororities should be thinking about when it comes time for recruitment.
Very much so.
Yeah. Now, you, of course, joined the Sigma Pi Executive Office as an educational leadership consultant, and you were working with chapters all over the Northeast. So, we're talking about, the United States and then even into Canada as well. And we had a ton of fun with that team back in the day. Those were the good old days, I tell you what was that experience like for you to just visit all these different chapters all over the Northeast?
You know, it's hard to explain to people what that experience is like every 4 days being in a different university, different city. Sometimes you get a hotel, sometimes you're sleeping on a couch. Like it's such a wild ride, coming out of college and going right into that. Just a few years older than the rest of the guys there, trying to help them through things and get them to see the way that the executive office wants them to operate versus how they want to operate. And it was an experience. I'll tell you, I think the people that I met during those years are some of the most pivotal and change-worthy people in my life. These are the people that I still go back to and message, years later, asking them, what are they up to? How are things going? Where's the chapter? Our Bridgewater State chapter up there outside Boston is just killing it on the social media game, and I feel like I know every single one of their newest members ever since I left HQ.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty amazing the relationships that you build. People don't really quite understand that until they start working for the executive office and have that experience. But most people, they're tied to their chapter and their chapter brothers. But for us, it's a little bit different. We created some really, really strong friendships with guys who went to totally different universities, and still maintain those relationships decades later, which is just really, really wild. It was funny because I was doing some work for the Mu chapter at Cornell. And when one of the alumni saw it from, like, 2 decades ago when I met him, he's like, oh man, these guys are in for a good time, And it's like, and it's just funny to me because those relationships started like 20 years ago at another campus that I didn't even go to, and they're still alive and well today. And I'm sure you have experienced the same kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it was just there were a number of folks like at NGLA, like
Mhm.
you do the affiliation luncheon, so everybody from the same fraternity sits at a table, and just it's all chapters I worked with. And so
Right.
being able to say, oh, this alumni so and so, like I worked really closely with him, like, oh, he's my great grand big. Like I come from the same family line. It's like it's such a small world. And honestly, working for the HQ side of things, it really gives you a new appreciation for the idea of brotherhood within the organization because you're not just seeing it in your campus and your alumni, you are seeing it across the country. You are seeing those values of leadership and service being echoed everywhere you go. And it's awe-inspiring in a number of ways.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's why I'm writing the dissertation on fraternity and sorority life right now. I think if I just had the experience at Buffalo, there's no way that I would still be writing about it and still working on it, because you do get this greater appreciation for what the organization brings when you have that perspective. And not a lot of people have that perspective, and I wish they would, because what a great experience that whole thing was. And then, of course, you went back to school at Rutgers for your master's in college student affairs. So, for all of those students who are listening right now that are considering that route of student affairs after graduation, what's your advice in terms of choosing a master's program?
Yeah. I mean, I think this advice applies not only to higher ed and college student affairs, but just in general. When picking college student affairs type program, there's two major avenues of education they provide. It's your theory and your practice.
Mhm.
And I would really challenge people to look at those programs critically and find that balance between those two. There are a number of programs that are very theory focused, number of programs that are more practice focused. But find that balance of the two. So that way you can really dive into the knowledge and the meaning behind the work you're doing while also getting that experience of doing the work while you're there. That Rutgers program was a great match for me because I was paired up with an internship in the fraternity and sorority office that I had to work the 2 years I was going through. And that community is massive.
Mhm.
We were about 100 chapters. It was just a huge community to work with. One of the most diverse communities you have to pull from, too. Rutgers is where, multicultural fraternities and sororities got started. And so their cultural fraternal organizations is just, it's a huge community to work with. And it was such an experience. And, for somebody from St. Louis, Southern Illinois area, it is a very, eye-opening experience to work with that many different groups, different identities, different areas. And the experience from that has been very helpful to me on the road.
Yeah, that's a big difference working with, within the SIUE community, fraternity and sorority life, and then going to Rutgers. I mean, these are like apples and oranges. This is like a totally different set of students. And I think that gives you a great perspective to really understand all the different councils and just the breadth of the system. And it has served you well. There's no doubt about that. And we should definitely talk about our favorite conference out there, NGLA. You served as a conference chair and on the conference leadership team for the Northeast Greek Leadership Association's annual conference. Talk to our audience. I mean, what are you most proud of from the time you spent working with NGLA?
Honestly, I don't think there's something I'm not proud of with my time working with NGLA. It is such a family. It is an experience. There's just nothing out there like it. I started with NGLA on the Educational Program Selection Committee, and then I moved into technology chair in 2019. That between 2019 to 2020, I took us from guidebook and just basic access to Hoover and a full integrated user experience with the conference, make it more integrated. And I am so grateful we had that change and I was able to help implement that because in the next year, when COVID changed us to a virtual conference, we had the infrastructure to run that. And it was just such a fascinating thing to watch that conference change on a dime to a full virtual experience. And honestly, if it wasn't for the volunteers involved with that, none of that would have happened. So, and coming off of my last year serving as a volunteer and a conference chair, my hat goes off to those volunteers and the amount of work that they've put in to make that conference what it is and to make it as accessible as it is to every campus across the Northeast.
Yeah, it really is a fantastic conference. And I agree with your assessment on family. I mean, you really feel that family structure when you go to NGLA. So if you've never experienced NGLA, I would highly suggest going to check it out because it really is one of the best conferences that I've ever been to in my career. And it's really all about the relationships. You know that people care about you and people are looking out for you. And that feels really, really good. So right from the beginning, I had that perspective, and it's carried all the way through to current day, which is great. You also worked at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County for over 7 years as a coordinator of student life for fraternities and sororities. What did you learn in working with the chapters on this campus that maybe was different than what you had experienced at Rutgers or at SIUE?
Mhm. I mean, I talk about the diversity and inclusion that I experienced at Rutgers. UMBC was founded as, and they talk about this being founded as the first culturally inclusive organization in college in the state of Maryland. Didn't matter what your identity was, they were a fully inclusive college. And so Greek life like exampled that. My experience there was very different because my IFC and my Panhellenic organizations were almost exclusively a fully diverse population that every time they went to their national offices, their national events, they'd come back and be like, sometimes I felt like I was the only person of color in the room.
Wow.
And they really were proud of that experience of that institution. And so, being able to work with them was amazing. Just the perspective that I was able to gain on organizations that I thought I already knew front to back from a whole different angle. And it was really cool working there.
That is really cool. I tell you what, you're gonna have to start working on your doctorate because I can see inside of you this great dissertation that's waiting to come out based on all of your experiences. I feel like, you've worked every corner of fraternity and sorority life. And of course, now you're the director of fraternity and sorority life at Bradley University. So talk to us a little bit about your job at Bradley, what that entails, and what the community is like there.
Yeah. Bradley has a very, very old fraternity and sorority system here. The university was founded in 1897 and Greek life started in 1898.
Wow.
Um, we have been here almost every day since the school began. At its peak, there's arguments that we represented somewhere between 50 to 80% of the student population. Nowadays, we're closer to a quarter, but it is still such a prevalent experience here that every Bradley student knows what fraternity and sorority life is just because it is such a presence on campus.
Hmm. Wow, that's amazing that it goes all the way back to 1898. That's a long time. That's a lot of fraternity and sorority life alumni that have come through the doors at Bradley. It's just that is kind of awe-inspiring to think that it's been around that long.
Yeah.
We should talk a little bit about some of these consulting services that you're about to start working on because you're going to be working with our team at Greek University for consulting projects. Why should other campuses work with you in terms of your services?
I think you said it right there earlier, Mike. Like I have honestly worked with such a variety and depth of organizations and campuses, different angles. Obviously I've worked with large schools, small schools, private, state. With Sigma Pi, it was 32 campuses across the Northeast in Canada. So just the amount of experiences that I've been able to have, the connections I've made, the differing areas, I feel like all those culminate into an ability to provide different angles and different insights to things that you may already be doing, but just need a little bit of tweaking to make it better. Or, hey, this thing that we've been doing for a few years was really great. Now it's not. How can we get back there? All of those pieces are things that I think we can sit down and really work through. Work with chapters here at Bradley, we have, a changing student population. And so one of the things we have to understand is, hey, we have more first generation students coming in the door than we ever have. What is your recruitment strategy? How are you talking to these students? Because you're saying things you expect them to know that they have no idea about. And so changing the language and changing how we approach, understanding the generational differences too. We are now shifting closer to Generation Alpha coming into college, and the things that they are going to bring and their want to change the system, it's going to make recruiting the way that we've seen it harder to implement, but also could be so much easier if you put in the right processes. One of the books that you all published that I, had a chance to read, incorporating ChatGPT and AI into your recruitment strategy can help refine a lot of the things you're already doing. So let's utilize those things so you can put your energies into more areas that you're going to be effective in.
Yeah. I'm seeing AI being used more and more at universities all over the country. It's so interesting that we wrote that book, a while ago. And, now I'm reading stories about a particular university that was using artificial intelligence in order to match up current students with their alumni in terms of mentors. And, being able to parse through literally thousands and thousands of alumni and then match them up to the interests of today's students. I was like, well, of course they're using artificial intelligence for that. I wrote a book about it a year ago to match up, college students with fraternities and sororities. So it's great to, kind of see these universities embrace artificial intelligence, using that technology to their advantage. I think we've just kind of skimmed the surface. I think there's so much more work that could be done with artificial intelligence. But I tell you what, you're right. I think you've got such a wide range of experiences in fraternity and sorority life that there's no doubt that you can help other fraternity and sorority advisors. A lot of these campuses are really just an office of one, and to have that, other person to come in and to help manage these full day workshops with their fraternity and sorority life community is such a wonderful thing to have. So I know a lot of campuses are going to be taking advantage of that in the future. So that's really, really great. And, listen, we certainly have seen our share of problems on fraternity and sorority life, campuses around the country. And sometimes, when we're talking about really difficult conversations, things like hazing and sexual assaults and alcohol and drug abuse, sometimes a membership review is a solution, either before a problem in a chapter becomes a much bigger problem, so being proactive about it, or sometimes it's reactive to address a significant problem that has already occurred in the past. Talk to our audience, about membership reviews. What is it? What does that process actually look like?
Yeah. So I mean, in most perspectives for organizations, when they hear membership review, they hear headquarters coming in and kicking out a bunch of people.
Mhm.
Like that's the experience a number of our college students have had. But that's not really true. A membership review at its core is sitting down with a set list of rubric criteria of this is what our membership should look like, and does our membership meet that? In those instances of, a hazing incident or, sexual assault major issue, that may result in some shifting in membership and who is around after that. But honestly, I would say membership review should be more proactive. It should be something that chapters themselves are conducting internally from time to time just to know, are we keeping our chapter in line with our values and where we want to be? And oh, yes, this brother he's really good, for us and he gets along with people, but man, he really brings all this baggage with him and we're really struggling with that. So a membership review isn't just finding those criteria, seeing the membership that match up, but it's also working through how to address those membership issues, whether it's giving the active membership tools to address it by confronting and working through, or is it empowering the alumni to confront that behavior and remove folks from the chapter when it needs to happen? Um, Part of what I'm offering in this process is that time, if we, start it early, to sit down and really critically think about that rubric and what are we wanting our membership to look like, and not just match those HQ values, but as that campus culture, what are those pieces we're pulling there that are important into the history of that chapter? And we shy away from the word tradition, but there are good traditions out there, and those are the things that we want to be able to carry forward. And sometimes that membership review can be that tool to do it. And I want to offer that ability to pull those things forward through that process.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something really big about being proactive with this membership review process. I mean, in the corporate world, we do annual reviews every year for stellar employees. It's not to say that there's anything bad about it. It's just to say, hey, are we on the same page here? Are we really recruiting the people that we want in our organization? And ultimately, how are we performing? Are we performing well? Are we average? Or are we below average? And then we can figure out a course of action to take in order to raise the standards of our membership. So I don't see it as a bad thing. And ultimately, I was having this conversation again with the Cornell chapter at MU, and just basically giving them some kudos for essentially having really good accountability in their chapter when they proactively saw a problem and then had to make some really difficult decisions about the membership of this particular brother, because they have good accountability, because they have a really good judicial board to hold their members accountable on a regular basis. And they're operating all the time. They don't really wait for problems. They're just meeting proactively to figure out what we can do better. And then when that really big problem does occur, then they're ready because they're functioning on a regular basis. So they're ready for the big one when and if that should happen. But for some reason, yeah, I mean, these membership reviews get a really bad rap. And the reality is we should be doing it more often.
Yeah. And, I'll talking about my experience in undergrad where we, kind of had a little bit of trouble there with my chapter.
Mhm.
It was a proactive leadership that approached the university and said, hey, look, we know we made a mistake here. Here's our path to solve this. Here's our path to address it. And it's what saved the chapter. And that was my entry experience into Greek life, was working through a chapter that was proactive about their challenges.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think a healthy chapter has their own accountability of their brothers or sisters. If you need, some outside entity to tell you what to do, such as the headquarters or even the university, that means that you're not able to function on your own. There is no accountability happening on its own. So I'd much rather see the chapter take that initiative and say, hey, I realize we got a problem and we're going to resolve it and we're going to enforce that ourselves. As somebody who has worked for a headquarters, as somebody that currently works for a university, I will tell you, I love seeing that. I mean, there's nothing better than that because they realize they've got a problem and they're doing something to fix it. And I've always thought that we really want to have the students learn something from this process. I certainly wasn't perfect as a college student. I don't think you were perfect either. I'm taking that liberty. But, and so I made mistakes. And I continue to make mistakes. I made mistakes as the executive director of Sigma Pi. I make mistakes as the CEO of Greek University, and I'll continue to make mistakes. I'll learn from it. But ultimately, we want it to be a learning experience. We want the students to realize, okay, you made an error here, just don't repeat it. And this is what the path looks forward going forward. So they actually learn something. I mean, that's why they're at college. Man, oh man, I could go on forever, I tell you. Now, you also offer some really great leadership development workshops. I know you have a few examples up on the website. Can you tell us a little bit more about these workshops and what the students will gain from it?
Yeah. I mean, so really from 12-ish years in higher ed, I've developed hundreds of programs over the years, to address almost any subject you can think of that Greek life has a connection with. So first and foremost, I I can modify anything that I have up there to meet your community's needs in terms of what you're searching for. Like I want to offer that. But those up there, those are good samples of things that, I can pull out of the box and just be like, here, this is ready to implement. No time to launch. We can get this, moving as quick as you need it to, kind of scenarios. And they're all focused on not just laying down some of that base knowledge and things that we can build from, but working toward adding some skills in as you advance. So when they walk out of those sessions, it's not just you heard a lecture for an hour or 2 hours on this subject, but I had some activities where I did it. And I feel like I can walk out of there and implement those skills either in my chapter or in my college experience, or even better yet, as I prepare to do my interviews and get into the career force when I graduate. That's the idea of what those things are going to be able to offer is not just here's a program you have to go to and I'm done. It's I'm giving you a whole thing, a whole set of things you can walk out of here with and utilize for your daily life.
I love it. All right, so that's really good. So it could be leadership, could be communications, whatever the issue is, you can develop that workshop with activities around that central idea, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, really good. I love this. So, and you know that I love good food. That is my weakness. And when I get a chance to speak at Bradley University, which I haven't had the chance to yet, but I hope to one day, where should I go for a great meal in the area?
One of the weird things, Peoria is kind of in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. It's an old town. It's been out here a while. It has a lot of good food options. It's
Okay.
hard to pick just a few to be like, this is where you got to go. Our students will tell you it's probably One World, which is a deli cafe style place right off campus. But man, I'm a big fan of Time, like Time is the herb
Mhm.
kitchen downtown. They have some really amazing dishes. Definitely worth the experience when you stop in.
All right, I'm going to check in both of those places and I'm going to report back. We're going to see who's going to win out of these two options. Is it the students or is it Corey's recommendation? We're going to see who's right.
Probably the students.
Probably. All right, so if our listeners, if they want to book you for consulting services in their fraternity or sorority community, how can they best connect with you?
Obviously my contact information will be on the website. Email is usually the tried and true method. But as we set up services and we communicate, I love to share my cell phone number. I love to be able to connect directly, to be able to answer questions as they happen. It's one of the things that a couple people that work in the field are like, 8 o'clock rolls around, I turn off my phone. I'm like, I'm a night owl and I'll get that message from a student at like midnight and they need an answer right now. And I'm just firing back and just like, why are you up? And I'm like, I just happen to be up, but I want to be able to connect with you when you're in that moment and you need that connection. And so that's one of the things that I will connect with this service is like if you need me or you need that response, like I will get on my phone and help you out.
I love it. Really, really good stuff. If you can connect with Cory, just email him. I'll give you one of the email addresses. It's Cory@GreekUniversity.org. Cory@GreekUniversity.org. You can also check out all of his bio and services and workshops. They're all up on the website. Just go to www.GreekUniversity.org/Cory, Cory. Cory Bosco, let me tell you, man, you are one of a kind, and I'm so glad to be a small part of your journey, whether it be at the executive office or now with Greek University. But I just want to say thank you. I mean, you've helped literally thousands of students across the country. You've worked with hundreds of chapters up and down the East Coast. And I just want to say thank you for the work. I mean, it's just incredible to have you as a resource here within fraternity and sorority life. And we're just incredibly grateful to have you on the team. So thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate it.
Of course. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation with Cory, I want you to like it on social media. I want you to share it with other college students that could use his help in terms of workshops and developing that on your campus. And we look forward to seeing you on another episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.